I'm Laura. I've been asked by Speak on Society to talk about my postnatal depression journey and my perinatal anxiety and depression journey. I guess I didn't know much about postnatal depression. I heard about it in a baby class. I'd say it's a birthing class. I wouldn't say it's a baby class. And in the birthing class, I learnt that 1 in 4 women get it. I think that was the stats at the time. And I remember looking to my husband and saying, I'll be fine. It won't affect me. Knowing that I had dealt with depression and anxiety before, but at that stage of my life, it wasn't very prominent. So I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. I was very wrong. Looking back now, I realize I had anxiety throughout my whole pregnancy. I was worried that nobody would love my baby like I do, that they wouldn't make the effort like I did for their children. I was very worried about, who would come visit when I gave birth. My mind was racing a million miles per hour. And through the whole pregnancy, I was constantly grinding my teeth. I was stressed. My back was aching because I was just so tense all the time. Fast forward and I gave birth. Wow. Wasn't expecting that. Birth for me wasn't like the movies at all, as you would know. It was actually more like a horror movie. I was in labour, I would say, for 3 days, although if you ask the nurses, it wasn't active labour. So they kept sending me home every time I went into the hospital. I had a posterior labour, which meant my baby was the wrong way. So I was feeling everything in my back, and I don't know much about posterior labours. I have read a little bit, but I know that they suck. So I was begging for an epidural straight away, which went against my birth plan. Now I know that shit just goes out the window. So I gave birth to this beautiful baby, and in the process of it, had a few bad experiences with the nursing staff. They didn't believe me that my epidural was patchy because I could feel certain things. They didn't believe me that it was time to push, even though I felt like I really needed to. And they didn't believe me that when I had given birth and I tore and got an episiotomy, so snip snip, that I could feel them stitching me up. I was actually called a sook by one of the nurses, and I don't even know if she meant for me to hear it, but she said it loud enough. So they handed me this baby that had a cord around its neck, wasn't breathing, not crying, and I freaked out, and I was like, something is wrong, handed it back. They fixed him, and he was all good, and handed me back to them. And that's when I guess I waited for the heavens to open up and for me to feel those love feelings like I had been told that I would feel. But I didn't feel any of that. I was kind of traumatized from the birth experience. I guess I had these high expectations of what, it should feel like. And so I just sat there and said, oh, that's what you look like. It was like this hairy thing, hair dark as mine, just looking at me like, okay, what now? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And for the next 3 days, I pretty much just cried. My hospital experience wasn't the greatest, which I guess didn't help either. But I remember just being so confused. Like, I did birthing classes, I learned how to put a nappy on. I know how to put a nappy on, but I was like, how often do I change this kid? How often should I be feeding him? And of course, breastfeeding, as you would know, is a struggle in itself. And my milk was not coming in, probably because I was just not relaxed, or who knows. But I was struggling to breastfeed him and actually produce anything. And I don't know about you, but in hospital, they kind of like want you to, they want you to be engorged with milk and, squirting it all over the room before they allow you to go home. But they really wanted to kick me out in the same token. So this is not scripted, by the way, so I'm just telling you how it goes. And for me, that gives me anxiety in itself, but this is my experience. So my baby had a tongue tie. I guess back then no one really knew what it was, but he just wouldn't latch. And I remember I was in a public hospital, and there was another mother who had just given birth to her 3rd child, And I remember the nurses coming in and they're like, oh, have you fed your baby? And they were like, yeah. She was, the mother in the other room was like, yeah, no worries, everything's great. No tearing, no cuts. She's like, no. And then they'd come to me and I'd be there sobbing. Like, how can this mother next to me have her shit together? Everything's going well. And then there's me who has no fucking idea. And I remember every time I was crying and the baby was crying, I just kept apologizing to her. And I never saw her. We never saw each other's faces. So I took that beautiful baby home, and I was still like, it's funny, you post on social media like the love of my life and, he's the most beautiful thing. And, I did feel like that. I did feel like that, but it was also it was like those feelings were in a box and they couldn't really come out like and be real and be like a reality feeling. Do you get what I'm saying? It was like I was writing what I thought I felt and I kind of felt, but around that box was this big cloud of sadness. And I never opened the blinds. Having feeding issues, we eventually got there. Having feeding issues, he never slept. I was so worried about overheating him. Now I look back and he was probably cold. He never slept. I never slept. And I had a really bad downward spiral. So I turned to social media and I joined mothers groups. I joined not so good groups. I joined groups about debating and stuff like that, where they just basically pay each other out, and tell each other how crap the other mother was because they were doing, parenting a certain way, which now I know, very bad. Do not do that. And that, I guess, made me feel like shit. So when my husband tried to intervene and give like my baby some formula, I freaked out. I was like, no, what are you doing? Don't you know about the gut and all that shit? Like, I didn't even let him help me because I felt like I had to be in control of everything. And, I let everything else get on top of me and all the opinions of other people get on top of me that, my husband he was useless. I mean, he's useless now, but that's another story. And, so I wasn't getting any help. It was all me. I didn't trust anybody else to look after my baby. And I was struggling big time. And I guess that aha moment for me was, he had been up all night. I had put him into his cot and I was rocking it gently from the advice of somebody. So I was rocking his little bassinet, and as I was rocking him, I noticed that I started to grip really hard on his cot and my knuckles actually turned white from how hard I was gripping. And he just kept crying and crying and I was like, no, I'm not allowed to pick you up, which I know now is stupid. I'm not allowed to pick you up. You've just got to, I've got to settle you in the cot. That's the rule. And then he just kept crying and I said, would you shut the fuck up? What is wrong with you? And that's what I said to my baby. And then as I said, I was like, it was like that was sitting in my throat for so long. And then when it came out, I like gasped at myself and I fell on the floor in a heap and I started crying and sobbing. And I was like, I hate this. I hate motherhood. I think I hate my baby. I don't love this. Where is all the joy that they promised? So I mentioned this to a maternal child health nurse and she said, that's kind of not normal. Let's do a test on you and see if you've got postnatal depression. Sure enough, I scored very high. I was then given a referral to an enhanced maternal child health nurse called Pauline. And Pauline, she saved my life. She taught me to open the blinds, how to sort of cuddle my baby and took the pressure off, all the rules that I had to do. She also referred me to a mother-baby unit where I learned, after feeling like the worst human being in the world and the worst mother in the world, that I was actually a pretty good mum, and that it was okay to struggle. I started off medication. While I was in the hospital, they took the baby at night, who slept perfectly, of course. And I started to get some sleep. And I just learned a lot about myself. You know, I learned that childhood trauma has affected my parenting now, and that's why I was very sensitive to a lot of things. It didn't matter how much sleep I got, these feelings were still going to come. And I also learned that I was worthy of help, and that I don't need to listen to other people's advice, and I can parent the best way when I parent my way. So the mother-baby unit ultimately saved me. I don't think I would be here if I didn't go to that mother-baby unit. I'm stalling because I'm thinking, don't cry on this video. And then when I brought my baby home, I was a different person after that hospital stay. It was like, that's what I needed when he was born. That's what I needed. That's the advice I needed to be given. And then I started seeing psychologists. I took medication. I learnt that it was okay to be me, you know, Laura, crazy, tattoos, you know, likes a drink on the weekend, and still be a mum. So postnatal depression is not easy. It's a horrible thing, and the media paints it as a horrible thing. But you are not a horrible person. You are not a horrible mother. And if you experience those things, you know, you can get help, and you do deserve that help. And there is nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with that. I survived it. And if I can survive it, trust me, you can survive it. And there is nothing wrong at all in the world reaching out for help. There's nothing wrong with that. If you need help, get it, because you are worthy and you deserve that. Bye.